episode 408 of Cinematary. I'm your host, Zach Dennis, and I'm here with
Andrew Swafford.
And in today's episode, we're going to be talking about movies that we saw this week, part one. In part two, we're going to be continuing our Young Critics Watch Old Movies series as we dig into 1933's King Kong, which should be an interesting chat.
Yeah, you were not kidding last week about that being a problematic movie, because it is that.
Yeah, but honestly, like there's some interesting things honestly going on. I don't know if it was intentional, but I do want to talk about some like interesting ways it deals with like some of the characters.
Yeah,
that
we'll get into
is
it.
definitely problematic, but also I don't know. Like again, I don't know if it was intentional, but there's like interesting things that it does with it.
I'm curious to hear the subversive reading of King Kong, but we'll get there.
Yeah. We'll get there. Well, right now, let's talk about the movie of the year, the movie of the summer.
Year.
Movie of the summer. I alluded to it a few weeks ago, but everybody else has dived into the discourse more. So let's talk Triple R, baby.
Yeah, I mean, after having seen it, like as soon as it ended, I was like, so that is the movie of the year, right? Like there's not another movie that's gonna beat that this year. It's
literally not another movie.
It's very rare that I have that experience. I think the last time I can remember having that experience was like for me when The Witch came out, which was like a January or a February movie, and I was like, well, that's gonna be my favorite movie of the year. No way anything is gonna be better than that, and it turned out it didn't. But Triple R is like, whew, it is really going for it, and it feels like it is working harder to be a great movie than almost any movie like attempts to, you know.
Well, and it was also like, I mean, we talked about it last time, but it's a 3-hour movie. But to be honest, like, I don't think I ever checked my watch, like my clock, to see like, oh, how much is left.
Being like really intense all the time.
It's so engaging. Like it's incredibly engaging for 3 hours, and literally once it ended, I was like, oh shit, it ended.
I think like Fury Road was like the watermark before. Like I don't think we've had a movie this hype that is like sustains that level of hype for as long as it does since Fury Road. And this, like, not to say this is a better movie than Fury Road necessarily, but it is even more impressive, I think, in some ways, in terms of just like how hard it goes for as long as it does. But I guess to give people who didn't listen to that last podcast a really quick summary of what this movie even is.
Fuck the British.
Fuck the British, the movie. This is an Indian film by this director S.S. Rajamouli. I've not seen his other movies, but I now want to watch the Bahubali movies. I want to watch Iga.
He has that series of movies that I marked down because I kind of wanted to get into those. I was reading that those are good entry points as well.
Yeah, those were the movies that he was known for before this came out. And I remember seeing Letterboxd friends logging them and thinking that's the thing I should get around to at some point. But now that I've seen RRR, I'm like, okay, this is like a director to know. Because so many of the things that are strong about it are like directorial choices. He also has a movie called Iga, which is like about somebody being reincarnated as a fly to like get revenge on someone who killed him. That seems fun. But anyways, RRR is about these two real historical revolutionaries who helped with India's revolution from Britain, who in the historical record never actually met. But there's like a period of time, like a gap in history where we don't really know what either of them were up to. And so this movie is kind of like history fan fiction, imagining what it would have been like if those two people crossed paths and like did some revolutionary shit together. And it is a thing that I was surprised by fairly early on is like just how silly it treats this subject matter at times. Like it is like truly sincerely mad about imperialism and Britain in general, but it is playing with that in some of the most like, I don't know, goofy ways imaginable. Like when these two guys cross paths, I don't think it's a spoiler to explain like any individual thing that happens in the movie, because like seeing it happen is what's crazy. But like they just see each other from like across a great distance. One of them is like on a shoreline, and one of them is on a bridge like over the shoreline. They like lock eyes, and they do like a finger, like a quick little finger communication with one another, and somehow from that finger communication / eye contact, they coordinate this entire crazy fucking rescue thing where they save a kid who's like drowning in a lake that has a train about to fall on him, and there's flames everywhere. And what they do is like one of them is on a horse. No, is one of them on a horse? I think one of them's on a horse. The other one is on a motorcycle. And they
because the guy on the bridge gets on a horse, I think, and the other guy gets on a motorcycle.
One's on a horse, one's on a motorcycle. They like get a rope, they tie a rope to one another, and the guy on the horse jumps off the horse, off this bridge, and then the guy on the motorcycle drives his motorcycle off the bridge, and they're both like swinging in midair, and somehow they arranged this from the finger pointing.
Honestly, amazing.
And then like every time they're together, it's that like that's when the musical dance sequences are happening, and like these montages of them like training together and like riding on each other's backs and singing together and like being celebrated in the town square, and it's just so silly and funny. Like I can't really describe like what level of reality we're operating on here, but in the action sequences, like the way they're choreographed and the way that really everything is choreographed in this movie honestly reminded me more of anime than anything else, or like reading a manga or something where in a manga, like I'm reading Berserk right now, which is like an action sort of like medieval high fantasy manga. And like you're not seeing the characters in motion, right? You're seeing like these specific action poses that the illustrator has put them in. And I feel like that is what the cinematography of this movie is like. You're getting a shot because that shot is like presenting you with like the most perfectly choreographed, or the perfect angle to see this like highly choreographed action. And it's just like constantly cutting back and forth between like perfectly composed image, like in terms of the way that people's bodies are situated with one another. Like it is so much more tightly controlled, and like it almost feels illustrated to me than almost any other action movie I've seen.
Well, you think about like more American action movies and American blockbusters. I mean, they're also using a high degree of CGI in those.
True. But like there's a lot of CGI here too.
There's an incredible amount of CGI, but it like utilizes it better and still includes like strong filmmaking techniques along with the CGI, where they're like paired together rather than using the CGI to make up for your lack of filmmaking techniques.
Right. And they're using CGI here to do things that they couldn't ethically do if they were not doing CGI. Like all the stuff with the animals, the way they use animals in this movie is insane. Like and the moment there is a moment halfway through this movie where a lot of animals show up all of a sudden, and I don't want to spoil the way in which these animals show up, but it is like one of the most incredible cinematic images I've seen in a long time. It's just like the shock of all those animals being there.
It puts the weekend's biggest movie, Jurassic World Dominion or whatever, to shame.
Oh my god,
to big absolutely. Shame.
Yeah, and the fact, there's a letterbox review that has pointed this out, but I think it's by Scott Renshaw. The fact that moment happens halfway through this movie, and then it still has another 90 minutes to continue ramping things up is insane. Now, I do also want to try to dip my toe into the whole like is RRR political propaganda or Indian propaganda discourse from last week. You know, I'm in a similar place as you, Zach, where as an outsider, as a white dude who doesn't pay all that much attention to like international news, I don't know a lot about the ways in which this movie may be carrying water for bad people politically in India. But it is very apparent by the time you get to the end of this movie that like it is Indian propaganda. Like there's a whole song, the last big song in the movie is just like, here's a commercial, basically.
It is a commercial.
Like India as a country. And honestly, I could have done without that number. I think the movie would be like, it is a kind of a reality breaking moment in a way that the rest of the movie doesn't. Like the rest of the movie is still like in this like cartoony reality, but near the end of the movie, during that last sequence, it jumps into, well, now we're not in the movie space at all anymore. Now we're just kind of on a soundstage and we're singing to you, the camera, about how awesome India is. And I could have done without that.
I kind of got past it because I'm like, we do that shit literally weekly in American movies, so whatever.
But what I'm thinking is like, if in Top Gun Maverick, which I still haven't seen, there was a moment at the end where they just like stopped to thank each of the founding fathers individually for like giving us this great nation, like that would be weird, right? And it is a different context.
I don't think they've thought of that. I think they would like to do that. They haven't like connected that idea yet to figure out how to do it.
Yeah. I mean, it's a different context, right? Because India as a nation as it exists now exists that way because of like a fight against colonialism, whereas like America like exists sort of because of colonialism and because of genocide, right? So it is a different thing. And like what this movie is celebrating ultimately is like revolutionary, you know, not liberal, but like revolutionary like action against an oppressive government. And so that's cool. And like that's kind of like the historical values that are being actually championed by the text of the movie. But the thing that is weird, that I think is weird for some people, or I can imagine being weird for some people, is that I think the Indian government as it exists right now is a pretty right-wing government. And my understanding is that like it's kind of a theocracy, like a Hindu theocracy, and again, I'm kind of just basing this off of like things I've picked up through osmosis. So I'm probably wrong about some of this stuff. Someone write in and correct us if I don't actually have this right. But my understanding is that like if you are not Hindu in India, it is not a very welcome place for you. I think that there is like government what's the word I'm looking for? Persecution of people who are not Hindu. And so for this movie to be just like rah rah India, our government's great, like there are cool parts about American history that you could make movies about, but if the movie ended with like, and that's why America is perfect and has no problems, like I would think that was weird, right? So I don't know. I'm of two minds about it. I think that regardless of the political, I guess this is the thing we get into again with King Kong, of like, how do you balance like how good a movie is on a craft level with like what, you know, cultural stuff it is sort of championing. But I think that even aside from like the political stuff, the craft and the like just the raw action filmmaking that RRR is kind of like counterbalances any of that for me as somebody who's kind of like at a remove from it in the West.
Yeah, I mean, I get that, and I think that, you know, it like the timing of it is strange. You know, I feel like whether it's an American movie or a British movie, I mean, most other countries filter that stuff into their, you know, even you even watch like, you know, Soviet movies. Like, I mean, that kind of stuff is just all littered all in movies, because movies are just this easy megaphone for propaganda.
And I don't even think propaganda is a negative thing necessarily. I think it's a neutral term. You can have propaganda for something that's really good, or you have propaganda for something that's really bad. But I think that is ultimately how stories work, is like they propagandize certain values and ideas, right?
Yeah, it's up to the viewer, the reader, to be able to critically think and assess, have the skills to kind of go, I see what they're doing here. Even if you agree with it, you have, there's so many things that I agree with the overall message, but I have to still assess it as, this is just, it's propagandizing this, like, and I think that speaking as a journalist, we have a lot of people who are unable to discern the two things, and it's not even just like, oh, those dummies don't. I'm like, no, there's people who I know are very intelligent who watch movies and don't catch stuff, or what's going on.
Sure. Because also we're not like, that is not a skill that you were taught in school, that like you should read movies in the same way that you like read books. Not that people actually learn to read books very well in school most of the time, but I think like in general we do not like prioritize like investigating the meanings of the media that we are encountering.
No. I recommend it. It makes you a lot of not fun. It makes you incredibly unfun. I don't really care at this point, but yeah, do that. It's an important skill to have.
It's important to be unfun.
Yeah,
I would also, as like a last note about RRR, would recommend if you liked this movie. If you, like many people, are watching this movie, maybe it's like the first Indian movie you've seen, because I know this is like kind of a crossover hit, might I recommend maybe the next night after you watch RRR, watch Dulce, which is also on Netflix and also is about revolutionary action against a corrupt government. And deals with it in some very different and interesting ways. And I think the thing that's interesting about that pairing is that RRR is kind of advocating for revolutionary action in the past, when it's kind of easy to do that after we've already seen the positive effects of that. And Dulce is kind of arguing for revolutionary action in the present, which I think is even bolder. But the movies like complement each other in some great ways, I think. So, yeah.
And if you watch that one, go back to our SRK series and listen to us talk to it.
We did an SRK series, yeah.
Well, cool. From the most action-packed movie of the year to the most sleepy time movie of the year.
That's right.
Let's talk about Memoria without having to call lawyers. Yes,
this is the first time I have seen Memoria. The only time I have seen Memoria for legal purposes. So Memoria is the new movie by Apichatpong Weerasethakul. We've talked about it a couple of times. I think it showed up on our year-end list in 2021, though not a lot of people could see it in 2021 because of this awful, kind of, maybe not that awful, like roadshow,
pretty stupid
distribution model that Neon did. I think it was maybe Apichatpong's idea initially, where he wanted to have the movie showing in one theater at a time and just like slowly going around the globe over the course of like over a year. And I would have been like,
that's a great idea, man. And then been like, guys, we're not going to do that.
I think he also maybe wanted there to be like never have it be a DVD release or anything. Like he just wanted the movie to exist in these spaces at this very, very slow pace because, that's who Apichatpong Weerasethakul is. And I think that what that eventually evolved into is like, well, certain cities are going to get it like gradually, and it not in the same way that like a limited release happens where like it's New York and LA and then it's everywhere, but like, no, it's like jumping from one city 1 week to another city another week. And it is in Knoxville now. So I went to see Memoria in a theater, which is the way that you need to experience this movie. It's one, I guess that's why Apichatpong was thinking like maybe it shouldn't be a home video release, because this is very much a movie that's designed for a theatrical experience, specifically because of the sound. Like a movie theater sound experience is so different from what you can get at home, even if you have a really nice sound system. This movie is all built around sound. I do have things that I want to say about like the story itself, but my main takeaway is that like this is a movie kind of like Portrait of a Lady on Fire a couple years ago, but even more pronounced here, that is like inviting you to pay attention to sound in a way that you usually do not in movies. Like the first shot of this movie is you're not even really sure what you're looking at. It's like the silhouette of Tilda Swinton sitting in bed, but we're just kind of, the camera just hangs on her sleeping body for a really long time, and it's like silent. There's like no sound in this movie whatsoever until a big bang happens.
Oh, this movie got me on some jump scares because those bangs are big, and they just come out of nowhere.
Really big, and you need that theater thump. Like the entire room needs to like vibrate a little bit whenever this sound happens. And then like she wakes up, she goes looking for the noise, she can't find the noise, she doesn't know where it came from, and then the next shot after that first scene, this is my favorite shot of the movie, and it's one of my favorite shots of any of Pitch Vs. Ethical movies. It is a shot of a parking lot, and is like slowly zooming in on this parking lot that has no people in it, just cars, and one at a time, all the car alarms go off. And you eventually have like, you're looking at 20 cars, all that have their car alarms going off. And that is, you know, for a filmmaker whose filmography is mostly associated with like silence and quiet, a really loud, intense experience to hear all these car alarms like blaring in your face for a while. And from that point on, you're kind of like keyed into this very specific wavelength where like every sound feels like it matters. Like there's a scene early on where Tilda Swinton's character is sitting next to a hotel bed, or not a hotel bed, a hospital bed, sorry, because her sister's in the hospital. And after her sister falls asleep, Tilda Swinton just like leans back in her chair very slowly, and you hear like every individual creak of that chair as it responds to her body as she's sitting down in it. And the rest of the movie is kind of like that. Like there's a beautiful sequence where she just like comes across a jazz band that's playing a song, and she doesn't know any of the people in the band, but she just like stops and listens to them for a whole song, and the camera stops and waits with her. And you get to listen to that song. And like so much of the movie is like, man, isn't sound cool? Like, isn't it cool the kinds of things we can hear, you know? And so that's like the main thing that I take away from it. There is like, I think a lot of thematic stuff to unpack, though I don't feel like I fully understand this movie, which I think that always with the Pitch Bum movies, I'm kind of grasping at something that's like just a couple more inches away from me. But I think this one is like, you know, to double dip in the thematics of RRR, I think it's about colonialism on some level. Like so much of it takes place in this urban space that almost reminds me of like Jacques Tati's Playtime or something, that is so different than the jungle that Apichatpong usually spends his movies in. And then in like the last third, we're back in the jungle again. And she's like communing with this guy who may or may not belong to this indigenous tribe that people were talking about earlier in the movie, like this tribe who doesn't want to be found. And I think there's something going on here with like people constructing a civilization on top of another civilization and kind of pretending the other one never existed, and like that older civilization kind of like still sort of being around as like a ghost or an echo or a haunting or something, which I think is maybe what's going on with the sound in this movie. Like Tilda Swinton is like, she's getting a quick hint of that and sort of following that trail where it leads her. But I don't know. I don't know what's going on in this movie really, on a thematic level, other than it really like forces a certain mindset shift and a certain like sensory experience that you're not going to get in a movie theater in any other context really. So it's good. People should watch it.
Yeah, no, I saw it in a theater at TIFF, and it was worth it because it was like 9 a.m. I was a little sleepy, so that was perfect mood. But then, like, it's great because you kind of lull in, you sleep in this, and it's like, boom, and you're like, oh, what's up?
Yeah, I watched it very alert, and I think, like, maybe it was because I had coffee that morning, or maybe it's because I was just so hype about seeing the new Pitchpong movie in a theater that I was just, like, very, engaged. But I do think that seeing one of his movies when you're, like, a little tired is kind of the ideal way to experience them. Like, he wants you to sort of, like, drift, like, just over the border of sleep and back again over the course of the movie, which can be a really cool experience.
Highly recommend.
Absolutely.
More sleepy movies. Big fan of them. Well, cool. So if you're lucky, Memoria might show up in your town because they got a stupid ass release schedule for it.
Yeah.
I mean, just give us like a Blu-ray. Christ Almighty.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever.
I really hope they do at some point.
Stupid as hell. Whatever. All right. Well, I'm going to wrap us up with the latest Netflix Adam Sandler partnership that really doesn't align with some of the other Netflix Adam Sandler partnerships. Mm-hmm. That is Hustle. It's directed by Jeremy Zager, who did a movie a couple years ago. I never saw it, but I remember seeing people talking about it. We the Animals. It was 2018, so it's been a number of years. But I remember people talking about that a little bit as kind of like an indie thing. So it's not like his usual stable of like Happy Madison people, even though it's a Happy Madison production. But the story is Adam Sandler is playing. He's a former basketball player who is now a scout for the Philadelphia 76ers. And so what he does is he travels all over the world, seeing players that could potentially play for the 76ers and kind of coming back with notes and things like that. And so at the beginning of the movie, you see him kind of going through that process, and he really can't find anybody. He finds one guy that is probably the best of the lot, but he's like, he's still not really up to the task of what they would want as a player. And so he presents that to the front office group led by the owner of the 76ers, played by Robert Duvall. And Robert Duvall clearly is somebody who's kind of believed in him, really pushed him, wanted to get him, kind of been somebody who's invested in his career. And then, of course, you have the shit son who is just like, I'm going to do whatever I want to do and fuck you. And that's played by Ben Foster, who's just kind of an asshole the entire movie. And so, at the end of the meeting, Robert Duvall pulls Adam Sandler aside and shows him this office, saying that he's going to elevate him from just being a scout so he can get off the road, and he's going to make him an assistant coach. And so he's all happy. He's pumped up. He tells his family. His wife is played by Queen Latifah, and they're all happy. But then Robert Duvall's character dies. And so Ben Foster takes over the team, and so he puts Adam Sandler back into the scout role. And so he's kind of annoyed, pissed off, done with it, but going on the road, and he's in... The movie really picks up when he goes to Spain, and he comes across this player played by real life NBA player Juancho Hernan Gomez, and he's just kind of like, it's during a pickup game. He's just like, holy shit, this guy's amazing, and so he kind of sends tape and sends all the stuff to the 76ers front office, and Ben Foster's like, I don't know about that guy. I'm not so sure about him. And so because Adam Sandler's character just like desperately believes in him, he lies to the player and says the 76ers are going to bring him in for a tryout and all this stuff. And so he flies him back into Philadelphia and all these things. And so then the movie kind of picks up into he's going through the kind of combine circuit, showing off for other front offices to be drafted, because by that time he has in his first tryout, it doesn't go well. He's bullied by actual NBA player Anthony Edwards, whose name is, what was his name? His name's Kermit Wiltz. And like Adam Sandler has this great line in the movie where he's like, "Are you gonna get bullied by a guy that's named after a frog?" But honestly, the two of them are pretty good. Like they actually do a good job in acting. Juancho Hernan Gomez is fantastic, and Anthony Edwards ain't bad. They're both probably better actors than they are NBA players.
Oh wow! Shots fired.
Well, Anthony Edwards he's still young, but Hernan Gomez way better actor than he is an NBA player.
Consider a career change, sir.
Mine as well. But so he has this first bad tryout, and then the rest of the movie is kind of him. He also kind of gets blackballed because the Ben Foster character starts leaking out all this stuff about him having a domestic dispute charge and other things. And he says that Adam Sandler, he fires Adam Sandler and gets, kind of starts dragging his name through the press. And so the rest of the movie is Adam Sandler kind of coaching up this kid, working with him and getting him up to the level to potentially be an NBA draftee. And to be honest, it hits a lot of pretty the kind of usual beats. It's not really veering from the path too much in terms of the beats of the story. But I think where it excels is one, Adam Sandler's he's really good. He's really good in this role. Like, I saw somebody describing it kind of like Sandler's in a similar mode to what I talked about with Tom Cruise a couple weeks ago with Top Gun Maverick, where he's starting to settle into kind of old age or older age and kind of just taking on these roles that are much more different from like Happy Gilmore or Billy Madison or something like that. And in this one, I think it's not up to the level of like Uncut Gems or Punch Drunk Love or things like that, but I think it's just like a really good, steady performance. He's constant. When you need him to step up in the scene, like he comes at it. Like he's really like solid the entire way through.
Do you think that Adam Sandler wants to be like more consistently a dramatic actor and does the comedy things because he knows that's what pays the bills, or do you think that this is a thing he does kind of for fun on the side?
I don't know. I think he does like it. I think it depends on what the project is. He did Uncut Gems because he wanted to work with the Safdies. He did Punch Drunk Love because he wanted to work with Paul Thomas Anderson. If fucking Tom Hooper calls him up and goes, hey mate, you want to do a movie with me? He's probably not going to go for that. But like I think like Spanglish, that's James L. Brooks. I think if it's somebody who he wants to work with, he'll work with them. And so
it's wild to think about Adam Sandler like sitting down to watch Heaven Knows What or something. Like he wanted to work with the Safdies, sought them out. That's wild to think about.
Oh, right. And I think they're doing another movie together.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And so, but this also, I think this was not that this one doesn't have like a big name director attached to it. He's been a lifelong basketball person. You see him constantly into basketball. You see those elements in the Uncut Gems and a lot of the Happy, like Mr. Deeds and other Happy Madison productions. Like he just loves basketball. And I think as like his, like, this is my basketball movie, I think it's kind of the perfect mix. But no, I think like I said, it hits the beats that you kind of expect. It doesn't stray from the path too much. But I think what it does well is it captures. This is a really good like cinematic basketball movie. Really, really good. I mean, it's close to, not as good, but close to the level of something like He Got Game, where it just captures the sport really well. It has this probably the best thing in the movie that really was impressive is it has this long montage that is really well edited, because it's like 3 different sections that could be like 3 different times you think this montage is going to end, but it like succinctly just edits it together in this way where it goes longer than you would think, and it goes to 3 different parts, but at the same time it flows together because it's just so well shot and edited, where you're watching the Juancho Hernan Gomez character just kind of going through drills, working with Adam Sandler. They have this really, like, they use this camera angle, especially with the scenes where he's facing the Anthony Edwards kind of antagonist character where they have these kind of shot reverse shots, but but at the same time while playing basketball, that and they kind of like to a degree silhouette it, so you see like their face and then it's kind of blurred out, so it's very much you just get like this intense one-on-one. And so I think it helps because while Anthony Edwards is just sitting there like berating him and getting in his head, it adds an effect not from what he's saying, but it just kind of creates this like almost almost expressionistic effect where or something like almost like an Ozu movie where you're just watching those shot reverse shots and you're just getting the profile of the person and everything else is kind of backed out. It's really like there's a lot of filmmaking skills on display here that, you know, it could have just been a basic basketball movie, but it does elevate it to that degree. So
But the guy who made it doesn't have anything else that's notable?
no, I mean, just in terms, you know, we mentioned like Paul Thomas Anderson and James L. Brooks and people like he doesn't have the name recognition of those two, but I hope that he kind of gets some more shots because again, like it's incredibly well directed. It's much more well directed than really the story it has any business from the story, because again, the story's pretty basic. But yeah, I think it's it's still a pretty funny movie. It has this wonderful. I like it because the player plays for the Mavericks, so I just kind of love seeing him. But it has this hilarious scene at the beginning with the basketball player named Boban. Who's like 7'3", is just this like freakishly tall. He's actually, if you've seen John Wick 3, he's the guy that fights John Wick in the beginning, because he's just like super freakishly tall, but he's also the most lovable guy of all time. He's just like a total sweetheart. But he's like one of the players that Adam Sandler is trying to recruit. And he's this, 7'3" Serbian player. And Adam Sandler's like, well, how old are you? And he's like, I'm 22. And he's just kind of looking at him. And then like this like 18-year-old kid, his 18 to 20-year-old kid walks out and he's like, who's that? And he goes, oh, that's my son. And he's like, well, how old's he? And he's like, he's 10. he has kind of like a 5 o'clock shadow beard. It's like, it's just such a silly moment that you get some of those where you kind of get that dissonance between like, this is an NBA player and this is not and this is not an NBA player. But no, I think I think it's worth checking out. I think it has, it's doing more than what you would expect from a lot of the Netflix Adam Sandler movies, and I think that he does give a really strong performance in it that kind of shows that I hope that the Meyerowitz stories and this movie and some of his other recent kind of more laid back movies are kind of the direction he's going. It also reminded me a lot of a very underrated movie from, I think 2 years ago, The Way Back with Ben Affleck, which is also a good basketball movie and also just a strong. It's just kind of one of those like middle of the road movies with a strong lead performance from a star that like. It's just kind of it's those things are just getting lost in streaming, and they're still good and they're still around, but they're just kind of getting lost in the shuffle because it doesn't have like the firepower of the blockbuster stuff that Netflix is putting out, or and they're not going to take that risk to put it in a movie theater. Like I would have loved to have seen this in a movie theater because it has those cheesy moments where you're like, I know what's going to happen here, but I'm also just really excited for these characters to like kind of hit that moment. So I recommend Hustle.
I know that Adam Sandler signed a deal with Netflix at some point where it was like a 10-movie deal or something. Do you know if he's still in that deal, or is this just kind of like a rolling thing that he has with Netflix? They just put out whatever he wants to do now.
I think to a degree it's a roll. I'm just going to look at his movies and see.
Because I know that they made that deal because Adam Sandler movies are actually getting more clicks than anything else on Netflix. And they're like, let's just make that our brand.
So let's see. I think he started it with maybe
the Ridiculous Six.
Yeah. So Ridiculous Six. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So this would be the 7th one.
Okay, 3 more Netflix Adam Sandler joints to come.
Yeah,
at least.
Yeah, I'm seeing he did that movie Murder Mystery with Jennifer Aniston. It looks like that's getting a sequel.
Oh.
He's also produced a bunch. I'm looking because he produced a couple like of the stuff that like Kevin James and David Spade have done as well. But
as another side note, I was Googling the Safdie brothers because you mentioned Adam Sandler working with the Safdies again. And another thing they're working on is very exciting to me. They're doing a series for Showtime with Nathan Fielder that is like a parody of HGTV house flipping shows.
And doesn't it sound amazing?
Nathan Fielder is like a house flipper who buys a house that's cursed. I can't wait.
Honestly, sign me the hell up.
Yeah, that sounds perfect. I don't know what the Safdie brothers are bringing to that, but I'm curious to see.
Yeah, honestly, Nathan Fielder could probably just handle it himself. But
he could do it himself.
Whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I mean, I think if you're looking for kind of just a low key, nice hour, I think it was 2 hours. It probably could have been cut down a little bit, but I mean, it's just kind of low key, nice little drama. Like I said, I think Adam Sandler was really good in it. So, Hustle, it's on Netflix. All right, we're gonna take a quick break, and then we will be back talking King Kong after this. Back with part 2 of episode 408 of Cinematary. In this part, we're going to be continuing our Young Critics Watch Old Movies series with 1933's King Kong, which I think we've had for a couple of years now. So good to finally get it on there.
Yeah, it's almost always on the ballot. But,
finally good to get it.
This is its year.
So,
Year of the Monkey.
Is it?
I don't know. Let me look it up.
Let's just fact check that while I'm working through these notes. All right, just a warning. Some of this stuff you're gonna like be listening and kind of be like, what are they talking about? Remember, Zach didn't write this. The American Film Institute wrote it in their quotes from at most like 50 years ago, but farther back. So we're just going to have that warning label. And so don't be coming at me saying, well, no, I didn't write it. That's just, we're talking about a movie from 1933, and we'll get into reasons why it might have these different these eclectic views while we get into the discussion. Anyway, all right. So I'm gonna.
It's the Year of the Tiger, by the way. Is this the most like touchy movie that we have talked about since Birth of a Nation?
It's not to that level. I was thinking about that
It's not to that level, but I'm wondering if there's anything that competes in the Cinematary catalog.
No. I was thinking about that actually, and I was like, this movie's got its problems, but it's not as like explicitly. It's not like reveling in like just kind of just simmering in racism like Birth of a Nation is. It's
you have to interpret it to get the racist stuff.
Yeah, it's definitely like kind of touching it a few times, but it's not like Birth of a Nation just simmers in it. It's just racism. Anyway, King Kong. It's directed by Marion C. Cooper and Ernest B. Schoedsack, which is a great name. From a script by James Creelman and Ruth Rose. The film stars Fay Wray, Robert Armstrong, Bruce Cabot, and Frank Riker. The working titles of the film was The Eighth Wonder, The Beast, and Kong. Honestly, you can laugh at Kong, but they literally made that a title eventually. So, according to a modern interview with Marion C. Cooper, the creation of King Kong began with him. In 1929, Cooper, who with co-director Ernest Schoedsack, had made 2 successful ethnographic documentaries. Grass in 1925, and Chang in 1927. He started writing a long monograph on baboons based on observations he had made of the animals while location shooting in Africa for Paramount's The Four Feathers, a drama he made with David O. Selznick, Shodzak, and Fay Wray. Although the monograph was accidentally destroyed, never rewritten. Dang. Cooper retained his interest in exotic animals and read The Dragon Lizards of Komodo, a nonfiction book written by his friend W. Douglas Burden, a trustee of the American Museum of Natural History in New York. In his book, Burden describes his exploration of the East Indian island of Komodo and his study of the rare dragon lizards that inhabit the island, Komodo dragons. In a letter to Burden written in 1964 and quoted in a modern source, Cooper says, then, quote, "Then one day after one of my conversations with you, I thought to myself, why not film my gorilla? I also had it very firmly in mind."
Well, these are questions I ask myself all the time. Why don't I just film my gorilla?
That sounds like he's talking about, like, his dick or something. Anyway. I also had very firmly in mind to giantize, that's what it says, both the gorilla and your dragons to make them really huge. However, I always believed in personalizing and focusing attention on one main character, and from the very beginning, I intended to make it the gigantic gorilla, no matter what else I surrounded him with. I had already established him in my mind on a prehistoric island with prehistoric monsters, and I now thought of having him destroyed by the most sophisticated thing I could think of in civilization. My very own concept was to place him on top of the Empire State Building and have him killed by airplanes. I thought that by mats and double printing and the new technique called rear projection, it could be done. I personally conceived and initiated development of the photographic process afterwards called miniature projection. I went ahead and wrote a number of outlines of King Kong in the years 1929 and 1930. In a return letter, Bird confirms many of his recollections, including that he wanted to, why not film my gorilla? After Cooper visited the set of Creation, a stop-motion action and animated film on which chief technician Willis H. O'Brien and his crew had been working for over a year, he concluded that the project should be scrapped, but that O'Brien's stop-action animation techniques, which O'Brien first developed in a 1925 First National film, The Lost World, should be used to realize his own giant gorilla idea. Cooper realized that by using O'Brien's techniques, Kong could be made without costly location shooting in Africa, and in a December 19th, 1931 studio report, Cooper writes, quote, "I have prepared and am sending my concept of this giant terror gorilla and the kind of scenes in which he should be used. However, before any large amount of money is spent on this picture, I suggest that we make 2 scenes with a giant gorilla to see how lifelike and terrible a character can be made." A contemporary New York Times article reported that, quote, 3 months were spent investigating scientific records before a single scene was photographed on the RKO radio sets. Geographical data concerning the vegetation, location, and population of an imaginary island were checked with experts in university research departments. Paleontologists were consulted by Willis O'Brien. It was discovered that the most likely place for an island where prehistoric monsters might exist was off the Malay Peninsula. The backgrounds were prepared with this locale in mind. More than 600 hand drawings with quantities of detail were made by the scientific artists Mario Larinaga and Byron Crabb. Ernest Smythe also drew some of the illustrations, and I just included this because this name is absurd. Edward Muybridge, in his 19th century sequence of photographs of animals in motion, as well as slow motion films of elephants, were also studied by the animators. According to another New York Times article, the, quote, initial work of the technical staff was kept secret from the general staff on the lot because RKO wanted to be certain the secrecy of its process was kept inviolate. I just got to go back. I like that they had to find the most likely made up island. I like that. The model of Kong was built around an articulated seal skeleton and had latex rubber muscles, which moved in a lifelike manner. The skeleton was stuffed with cotton, covered with liquid latex to form the basic shape, and then covered with bear fur. Originally, they were.
Do we know how big it was?
It was like it wasn't lifelike, but I think it was pretty big. I think it would, probably not that. Like if it was standing here, it'd probably be like up here.
It'd probably be almost the size of a person.
It was decent sized. Originally, rabbit fur was used, but was replaced after the animators discovered that it held and revealed their finger impressions from shot to shot. Because the models suffered wear and tear over the course of shooting, 2 Kong miniatures were constructed and spelled each other as needed. The miniature dinosaurs had their own stand-ins, simply constructed models that were used when a set was being lighted. In her autobiography, Fay Wray describes how the, quote, big arm sequences were shot. Quote, the big arm, about 6 feet long, was attached to a lever so it could be raised and lowered. I would stand on the floor while I gripped, would place the flexible fingers around my waist and a grip secure enough to allow me to be raised to a level in line with an elevated camera. There was a wind machine to give motion to my clothes, and I struggled to give the illusion that Kong was a fearsome 40 feet tall. Joel McCrea was first considered for the role of Jack Driscoll, but Bruce Cabot was hired because he was perceived as better suited to the physical demands of the part.
No, disagree. Wish we got him.
Put Joel McCrea in whatever movie you want. In 1933, The Hollywood Reporter said, "Picture to yourself a beast larger than the largest you have ever seen, even in books, falling in love with a beautiful girl. In protecting her, he literally wrecks the animal kingdom in which he lives. He kills first one monster, then another, and another. He destroys practically an entire tribe of cannibals. Finally, he is captured and brought to New York for exhibition. He escapes, throws the city into panic, scales high buildings, wrecks subways, always in search of or believing he is protecting the girl. If you can picture these things in your mind, you have a faint idea of King Kong."
I do approve of the choice to use a phony 1930s radio announcer voice when quoting all these things. Makes it harder for people to clip you out of context, I suppose.
There you go. And in 1933, Variety said, While not believing it, audiences will wonder how it's done. If they wonder, they'll talk. And that talk plus the curiosity the advertising should incite ought to draw business all over. Kong mystifies as well as it horrifies and may open up a new medium for scaring babies via the screen.
That's what's important. We need a new way to scare babies.
Somebody got paid to write that. Oh my god. All right. Had you seen King Kong before?
No, I never have.
I'd seen it once before in a theater. So what did you make of it?
Well, what I make of it varies wildly based on what part of the movie we're talking about. Because there's basically like 4 parts of the movie. There's the part of the movie before we meet King Kong. There's the part of the movie where King Kong fights dinosaurs. There's a very small part of the movie where we're getting ready for a show. We're going to show King Kong off to New Yorkers. And then there's the Empire State Building showdown part. And I really like that second chunk. And I kind of like the third chunk too, about like the show part of it. But like the thing that's cool about the second chunk, Kong v. Dinosaurs, really has nothing to do with the first chunk of the movie, which I think we'll probably both agree is like pretty awful. Right?
Oh, like the part of them, like kind of like him finding the actress and then them going to the island.
Yeah, just like the whole
it's super
framing,
it's super boring.
Like the narrative conceit as to why we're on the island where Kong is in the first place is just kind of awful, and like both in terms of it's kind of boring, and it's like really sexist and really racist, and it's like kind of frustrating that like that is the narrative frame of the movie, because like you can make a movie where a big monkey fights a big dinosaur and it doesn't have to be about any of that shit, you know. Like, listening to you giving the fact sheet about this movie, hearing like the behind the scenes story, it seems like what they mainly wanted to do is to tell a story about a big monkey. You know, like they just wanted to see a big monkey fight shit, you know? And like the historical record has shown you can make plenty of different kinds of movies about big monkeys fighting shit. But this
Jurassic World in theaters now.
That's right. But this particular movie, hoo boy, it is like just kind of inviting you to read it in the worst way possible. I mean, we should talk about the sexist stuff, and then we can get into the racist stuff, because that's kind of like how the movie presents itself.
Are we going to start there and then get to the actual craft of the movie, or what's the order we're doing here?
What are your thoughts on King Kong in general? You've seen it before, right?
Yeah, I saw it once in a movie theater, which kind of made it a little bit more fun, just because you have, as you described, big monkey fighting things. Hella fun on a big screen. You definitely recognize it. It's deeply blatant, the sexism and racism. The racism, I think, is
a little bit more implicit.
It's more implicit. The sexism checks with a lot of, if you watch similar kind of like blockbuster, like big show movies of this era, you're gonna run into that shit. The interesting thing, and this can kind of lead us into the sexism discussion, is I think I'm not condoning the sexism, but I think there is like an interesting parallel between you. So here's the kind of scene that unlocked it a little bit. You have that sequence before they get to the island where the what's his face, Jack? Is it Jack? Who's the director?
I don't know. I call him the director. Oh no, it's
Carl. Denham. They call him. They kept calling him Denham. So Denham is like directing the Fay Wray character on like how to react for this thing, and he's like sitting there like rolling the camera and just shouting like different commands at her, and she's kind of just reacting to it. And you even have like the sailors kind of like going like, well, what the hell is she doing? What do they expect to be out there that she has to like act like this? And so like the way you kind of see him kind of like prop her up and construct her, and really just kind of pluck her out of the environment she was in. I think you kind of like that. I think that creates a deeper connection to a degree with the Kong character, because Kong gets plucked out of his environment and then they just kind of doll him up and show him off. And so I think that they're again, like, not to condone the sexism, but like they're like, it's to a degree I found it to be there. And again, I don't know if this is intentional, but it was there. I guess kind
it depends on like to what extent we are supposed to find the director's behavior in this movie kind of like questionable, right? Like,
and I don't think they really prop him up to be like, oh yeah, this is a great guy. Like,
I don't think he's propped up as a great guy, but it feels like he's maybe just like an author avatar or something. Like it's a director who wants to show the world a grand spectacle like they've never seen before, which is what this movie is, right? I think that it's a movie about the making of this movie, sort of.
Yeah, but he's also, you get it in comments, like when they get back to New York and other places. He's also kind of this, like, he makes a bunch of shit. He seems to constantly be kind of working in this mode, and he kind of has like this grifter vibe. Like, he's just constantly kind of just like doing what he needs to do. And so that's why I say I don't think they really present him as like, oh, this is the guy you want to be. And so I think that to me it's kind of interesting, like his treatment and how he's kind of propping up the Ann Darrow, the Fay Wray character, compared to what he does with Kong later on, where he just kind of has him. He strips him out of the environment and props him up to be this spectacle for people.
Yeah, Jessie was kind of like wandering in and out of the room while I was watching this movie, and one part that she was there for was it was the third chunk of the movie, as I'm labeling it, where they're back in New York and there are reporters that are talking to the director and Fay Wray's character and asking them about their adventure out to this island where the monkey was found. And like, he is going on and on about this like horribly scary thing that happened to her, and she's not really saying much of anything. And Jessie's like, this is probably fun for her to like relive the worst day of her life over and over for like, excited tabloid journalists. Like, let me just like, tell you about my trauma, and but the way the movie is shot and framed, like, does not really encourage you to think that anything that is happening here is tragic, right? This is just like, this is what's happening. You know, journalists are talking to her, and like, we're not really encouraging the audience to think about that in one particular way or another. You know, like, it's very flat in terms of the way that the story is actually told to us. The only time the movie feels flashy in any way is when there's a giant monkey fight and stuff.
No, that's why, like, I think if the movie, and that's why I say there's not much, I don't find this to be really the intention, because I think if it really wanted to intend it, it would have given much more moments to Fay Wray and the Ann Darrow character just to kind of explore how she's kind of just sidelined and, again, just kind of like being dragged along for the ride. And that's why I say, again, I like, this is me kind of interpreting the movie, but I do think that there's this kind of interesting parallel between her treatment, not only going to the island and on the island, but even after it, she's just kind of, again, she's just thrown out there to be a part of the show, to how they're treating the Kong character and kind of going, we're just going to parade him around, make him do a few tricks, and this is going to be the rest of his life.
Here's a question that's related to the Fay Wray character. Why do you think that there's these two male leads? Like, we have Carl Denham, the director, and then we have Jack Driscoll, the love interest. And it feels like maybe in an earlier version of the script, those were the same person. Because Jack Driscoll, the love interest, is like a complete non-entity in this movie. Like, he's only there for there to be a love interest, right?
Yeah, I think also you kind of have like a good and bad type, because I mean, like we said, like we wouldn't describe the Denham character, the director, as like this is the person you want to latch on to as like the good character of the movie. So they add the Jack character to kind of be more of the moral core. Because he's the one kind of going like,
but isn't he the guy who's like complaining about women constantly in the first chunk of the movie, and like he tells her he loves her and she's like, but Jack, you hate women. And he says, but you're not women. And she has this like, you know, fluttery look on her face.
Oh, shut up.
Like,
I'm not a woman. Yeah, that's her moral core.
That's the moral center of this movie. Yeah.
But I don't know. I mean, I'm just kind of, that's my assumption of why he's there.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate the attempt to find a subversive reading of King Kong. I don't know that I buy it completely, but it is true that, like, I guess the way we're supposed to view the director is more ambiguous than I was giving it credit for.
I mean, I'm just saying, I don't think it's like we open like going like, how does this compare being problematic compared to like Birth of a Nation? I'm like, it's nowhere near that. I think it's more in line with just how 1930s American movies were like. That's just, you know, that's just kind of the line. That's the kind of line, and that doesn't justify.
Well, I mean, I've seen a lot of 1930s movies, and like, most of them don't really address racism, but most of them don't necessarily remind me of racism either, right? And this movie is like, feels like it is actively doing it. Like, they is showing me, you know, this tribal people in a way that is like meant to be as dehumanizing as possible, and then presenting this gorilla character as almost like the ultimate version of these people or something like that, right? It's gross to think about. And like, specifically, this is not like rocket science, you know, critical analysis here. I think this has been said a billion times, but, you know, specifically presenting like white womanhood as the thing that like drives the, you know, the African beast wild, is you know, deeply problematic for, you know, a lot of the same reasons that Birth of a Nation is problematic, right? Like, it is about the black male raping of white women, which was, used as like the threat of that or the imagined fear of that was used as justification for the Ku Klux Klan and, like the people who killed Emmett Till and stuff like that. I'm never not thinking about that whenever King Kong is like grabbing Fay Wray's character out of a bed. Like he reaches his hand through the hotel window and grabs her in her nightgown out of a bed.
It's also a pretty gruesome movie because the way he, it reminds me of how they've talked a little bit about the recent Jurassic Park movies by Colin Trevorrow, where there's just random characters who will just be brutally killed. Like the big example is in the first one, the Jurassic World movie. You have this kind of she's like an assistant or something.
Assistant.
Yeah. And she's supposed to be kind of annoying, but then they have a pterodactyl pick her up and fling her around and then throw her into the water, and then this giant thing goes, oh, and you're like, what the fuck did she deserve that for?
Yeah.
And you think of this movie, one, when Kong's just in the jungle, he starts taking out things, but then when he's in New York, there's the one lady who he just goes in there and grabs and just tosses out of the building into the, and you're just like, Jesus Christ.
I mean, the victim of Kong that I feel the worst for is the T-Rex. Kong headlocks him and then grabs both halves of his mouth and twists his jaw sideways, and he just is still alive there, just bleeding from his mouth but can't move anymore. That's pretty rough.
He does, while he's in New York, eat a bunch of rich people, and I approve of that. There's just rich assholes in tuxedos. He eats them. I'm on that.
Yeah,
that's fine.
I thought that the rich people go into the theater banter in the third part of the movie was pretty funny. Half of them don't even know what they're showing up for.
I like the guy who was I paid $20 for this. As if he's just said, I paid $10,000 for this. I'm $20. Hell yeah. You can go see a giant gorilla? Marion Cooper would poop his pants for that. All right. Yeah, no, I mean, there's really no defending on the how the portrayal of the tribe. That's the main thing I was alluding to last week was no, it's not great, because there's, again, if we're talking about how people are killed in this movie, for the most part, I want to do a quick aside though. When people are killed, they switch them from being humans into these stop motion.
Yeah,
it's awesome. Anyway, but no, there's definitely when the first search party or whatever is getting killed, they're getting thrown places, they're getting chomped a little bit. There's a different nature with how Kong, whenever he breaks through the gate and starts attacking the tribe there. There's one where he just pummels this person. There's one where he just kind of almost bites him in half. It's just there is just kind of this gruesomeness, and there's definitely this level of secondary or even third on the scale level of this is who I care about in this, in this movie is from the production side, because the treatment of the tribe characters are just they're just these podunk, natives who don't know anything.
Horrifying mass of people, a threat. You never see. I don't think there's a single shot of just one tribesman. You never see them alone. It's always the crowd that could, swarm and overtake us.
And they're never given a moment to kind of speak for themselves. They're always speaking in this kind of mumbo language they make up.
It is very funny to me that the skipper on the ship just happens to know a language. Yeah. Oh yeah, they sound kind of like that other tribe on that other island. Yeah, let me just bust that out.
It's
real quick.
A less fun version of the scene in Pirates of the Caribbean 3 where he's shipwrecked on that island, and he becomes the chief of this native tribe, and he's just babbling nonsense. That one's at least a little bit. Or
Muppet Treasure Island, where Piggy becomes the leader of some indigenous tribe.
King Kong could never.
Well, do you want to talk about the actual stop motion stuff? Because that's what's cool about this movie.
And that's the thing. Like, so I do like this movie. There's so many elements of it that aren't great, but the technical craft of it, like the special effects, are insane. Like, it's incredible that this is like a movie from 1933 looks like this. I mean, like I was talking about, the way that and even they do it with Fay Ray, where like you'll get cut from a scene of like her on the ground or being held, and then it'll cut and you'll see kind of like not even a dummy, but like a stop motion figure in Kong's hand, and it's just like that really, to me, not even just the animation itself, but the ability to transition from live action to a stop motion thing just so seamlessly. It feels very modern, just from how it kind of transitions characters from being on the ground human to kind of stop motion characters that he's using.
Mm-hmm. I would just very quickly Googled when the Ray Harryhausen movies came out, Jason the Argonauts and Clash of the Titans being the two most popular. And man, I thought they were so much earlier. Jason the Argonauts came out in 1963.
Yeah, I was gonna say that those were a while off.
Like, it is just amazing to see how sophisticated they were able to make the stop motion in the 30s. Because like, we're gonna talk about, is it next week you guys are talking about Tale of the Fox? That looks really shoddy compared to this. And so, I mean, I guess it's like big Hollywood budget, but, you know, animators and you know, craft people had to spend a lot of time and effort and like ingenuity to make this look as convincing as it does, which is pretty convincing.
Yeah, again, like all everything aside, like just the craft level, like the people, like that Willis O'Brien and his team who's like creating that animation, like they deserve, if anything's getting credit in this thing, it should be them, because they really do make it. Like if so, back to our original point, if they just wanted to make giant monkey fights things, like you should have just let him and his team just kind of make it, and it would have been a super fun movie.
Mm-hmm. It looks better than the stop motion stuff in Godzilla, the 54 Godzilla, I think. And that's a better movie, I think. It has like an emotional core.
Yeah. And I didn't get to, just because there's so many things we could be getting into with this movie, because there's just a laundry list of different just facts. But it is like, if I would recommend listeners and people watching to just do some research on just the process of that side of things, because the way that they constructed that and were able to seamlessly work it into the live action sections, just like two characters kind of in the foreground, and like the stop motion animation in the background of like a dinosaur or Kong or something like that.
Well, there's this shot of all the men like balancing on this log, and Kong in the background like shaking one end of the log and like knocking them off the log into this big ravine. Like, I really am not totally sure how they did that. You know, I guess they shot just Kong moving his hands around, and then just a shot of the log being like moved by an animatronic or something like that. But it looks really good.
No, and that's what's so impressive, because today it would be a very easy, it's like what they do with the Jurassic World movies. They're acting against a tennis ball or something on a green screen. But no, like this one, they were using rear projection. It was really like the whole technique was fascinating. Fay Ray talks extensively about her experience, because she's having to do probably the bulk of the acting up against the Kong figure, and it's just even more than like Chris Pratt in Jurassic World. Like, she's really having to act against nothing.
It reminds me of, like, thinking about how they must have made this and what kinds of things we end up seeing on screen. It reminds me of like any movie where you have a character playing or an actor playing two roles. A lot of times the way they do it is they split screen it, and you can kind of tell, this character played by the actor is on one side of the screen and this character played by the actor is on the other side of the screen. You can see where the split happens, and there's a lot of times in this movie where you can kind of tell that too. Like, there's a shot where all the tribesmen are like up on this ledge, and you see Kong beneath him. So, okay, we can split this frame in half, and like the bottom half is like one composite image, and the top half is another composite image. But there are a lot of moments where, like the log scene, and like any moment where like Fay Ray is like in the gorilla's hand, where that is not the case, where they're like kind of stacking these images on top of each other in some pretty creative ways.
No, there's a really incredible sequence where I forgot Kong's just like it's when she's just strictly with Kong, and you cut from like the big hand that they shot to put her in. You cut from like that to him putting her down, and she's like kind of moving around as a human, and then he picks her up again, and it goes to her as like a stop motion character, all within the span of like 30 seconds, and you're just like, holy shit, like that's awesome.
A lot of moves being made.
Yeah, like the editing side of things was just incredible. And so now, even I mean, just the whole. I'll admit the whole spectacle of that final sequence when he's on top of that Empire State Building. One, I didn't recognize like how just kind of tragic it was, you know, like the animation of. I mean, you see like bullet holes, like cuts that he's getting. You can kind of, in the way that they're able to animate the Kong, that kind of you can feel it. That whole sequence is amazing. Like it's just like that's just incredible sequence.
It's the image of Kong on the Empire State Building is, of course, an image that I've seen a million times just because, like, pop culture, it's everywhere. I never really understood, like, why he's up there, though, because it seems like a bad place to be in terms of, like, you're putting a giant target on yourself, right? But watching it in context and thinking about, like, the psychology of a character of Kong, like, to the extent that we get any psychology from him, you know, he's trying to find like high ground to be like the king of the jungle, right? When we see him in his home, he's up on top of a mountain where he like doesn't have to deal with any predators except for like the pterodactyl that comes by for a second. He just like quickly like rips its wings apart or whatever. And he's not ready for like what the modern world has to fight him with. Right, so it is tragic to think about this figure who is just like plucked out a completely different world and doesn't like it just doesn't fit here. Like is out of place and is just like scared, basically.
Yeah, I got more into the kind of Kong portrayal and like the animation work that Willis O'Brien and his team did, just because you are like there's an amazing amount of sympathy that you're able to glean out of that character, and it's completely because of the way they animate it. I mean, just I'm describing that scene. I mean, you can see him just kind of.
He has a very expressive face.
He's very expressive, and so like just that, and that's why I'm like, just like that performance alone through the animators is really impactful. You know, you can kind of laugh at a number of the other performances in this movie, but that one's the one that actually is like technically proficient because. You're not. It's not like he's going to be able to talk. It's not like you're going to be able to really do much. But they do way more than you would expect with just a, you know, kind of skeletal figure that has fur on it that you're supposed to move around. And especially again, like I'll reiterate that last scene, like when he's just getting shot. He's like up there just kind of trying to do his best and getting shot by these airplanes, and like I don't know. You feel bad for you're just like I mean he just wanted to live on his island and fight his dinosaurs.
And you were kind of like up there with him for a pretty long time while he's just kind of being pelted by, you know, bullet after bullet. Like he doesn't fall immediately. It's several waves of the planes coming and eventually knocking him down to kind of like really dwell on that.
I haven't seen the Peter Jackson one. I've seen parts of it, and it's been a long time. But I think that it tries to kind of.
I remember watching.
It kind of tries to tap more into like that. I think I think Naomi Watts is the female lead.
I don't remember. I remember Jack Black is in it.
Jack Black is in it, yeah. But I think it's Naomi Watts who's the female lead, and like they really try to play up that whole the kind of dynamic I'm describing between her and the Kong.
The thing about that movie is it's 187 minutes.
It's a long ass movie.
I watched it when I was like 13. I'm pretty sure, based on the year it came out. And
interesting.
I thought it was boring.
It's interesting. So Jack Black is the Denim character, So he's the director, and then Adrian Brody is the Jack Driscoll character, and Naomi Watts is Ann Darrow. Huh. I kind of want to watch it.
Watch it. I mean, Peter Jackson is a blockbuster craftsman when he wants to be, right?
Yeah, and I would just be curious on how they handle things.
Yeah, I would be curious to hear secondhand from you. I don't want to watch it myself, but please let me know.
Fuck, I don't want to watch it.
Faye Ray is good in this movie too, by the way. I think
she's great.
That's
why I say she's not given a lot.
The scene where she has to basically act in front of a tennis ball, there. And when I'm talking about like when they're still on the ship, when they haven't met Kong yet, and the director's like, let's just do some screen tests. I'm going to tell you what to do, and you're going to emote. Like, she sells it. It's like that scene in Mulholland Drive where Naomi Watts is at like at an audition, and she starts like acting this intense scene with this guy, and they both get so into it that you like forget that like they're just in an audition space, and you start like being invested in this scene. Like I think that's how good how convincing Faye Ray's acting is in that moment.
Any final thoughts before we leave?
Not really. I feel like I've said most of them. We haven't given enough credit to the dinosaur animation, which is also really good. Again, like my favorite chunk of the movie is Kong v. Dinosaurs in the second part. And that's all just really cool. So yeah, I'm glad I watched it. It's definitely one of those like homework movies that you need to watch at one point or another if you're going to be a informed film person.
I would watch it if you're like into animation or things like that. At least watch it on that level, because I think I find it to be a pretty crucial animation touchstone.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of like what are the animation touchstones before this. I was thinking about like
probably the Lost World.
Some of the Milius stuff might qualify, right?
Yeah, some of the Milius stuff, but then the Lost World that's what Willis O'Brien worked on a little bit before. And that we've had that one on the Young Critics list a few times. That hasn't.
Have you seen it?
Bastards won't vote for it.
Well, maybe next year.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I mean, I agree. I think it's one. At least watch it once. It's not like it's a long movie. Watch it once. It's one of those. It's worth it for Kong v Dinosaur and the whole the whole New York Empire State Building sequence.
King Kong or Godzilla, Zach?
I definitely like the original Godzilla more. We needed Seth on here to be our giant creature expert.
We are kaiju expert.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, I think Godzilla is both the better movie and the better monster. IMO.
Less racism and sexism too.
Yeah. That's a plus.
All right, that'll wrap up this episode of Cinematary. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/Cinematary, on Twitter and Instagram at handle @Cinematary, and on Letterboxd at letterboxd.com, where we list all the movies that we talked about in this episode. If you would like to support the show, whether it's $5 or $1, head over to patreon.com/Cinematary to donate. Thank you so much to our patrons: Cam, Chad Newsom, Corey Willingham, Candace Sisson, Ron Hayes, Teresa Marsathi, Titus Arthur, and Tyler Chandler. Thank you so much for supporting the show. Next week, like we alluded to, we're going to be talking about the 1937 film The Tale of the Fox, because it's 1930s stop motion animation, I guess.
That's right. 1920s are all about German Expressionism. 1930s are all about stop motion animation, people.
And the 40s are just going to be about grifting. We got the Treasure of Sierra Madre and Bicycle Thieves.
Oh, yeah. I guess I should be on that Bicycle Thieves episode since, was it
Did you hear me call you
Michael
out?
wanting me to
Did you
be
hear me
on
call you out?
Yeah.
No, I called you out.
I don't remember talking about that on the show at any point, but I could be wrong.
I think it was super early.
Yeah.
Well, no, it was during you hated La Dolce Vita.
I hated La Dolce Vita, yeah. That's true. That might be what you're thinking of.
And so I purposefully used my my eminent power to put an Italian movie on.
Okay.
Because, one, we never talk about Italian movies for whatever
we
reason.
don't. I'll be back for that one.
Okay. Until then, thank you all for listening. We'll see you next week.